Hello everyone, this is a follow-up video to demonstrate how I modified the spur gear on my two-wheel drive Arrma Voltage. I originally made a video about my Arrma Voltage and I had Devin and Leonard's RC Garage asking about basically how I modified my spur gear. So here's the video to just give you an idea on how I did it so you can replicate it at home. For starters is that you will need the stock Arrma gear that came off the vehicle. You would also need the bearing that was originally in here. You will need 3 of these screws. This is an M3x6 countersunk screw. You would need 3 of these. Also, it would be helpful if you have a 5x11 bearing. The bearing that was originally inside this Arrma spur gear is 6x11. If you have a 5x11 bearing or a measuring tool like this, that would be helpful. But you definitely need one or the other. You need a pencil. You definitely need drill bits. You need a cutter. You need a file and a blade. If you don't have a drill bit, hopefully you have one of these. This is basically just a hand chuck, so you can put your drill bits onto it and drill by hand. To start off with, so once you've gathered all your tools and materials, you'd also need the 58 tooth traxxas spur gear, so don't forget that. So once you have all the materials, you'd want to start by taking the stock Arrma spur gear and drawing a template onto it so you can trim it down. So one method is that you can take this 5x11 bearing, you can rest it on the spur gear, and you can take the pencil and just basically let the pencil rest on the inside of the bearing at one side of it, and then just spin the spur gear, and eventually what's going to happen is that you'll end up with this circle. You'll see this pencil line that's here. So just keep doing it a few times and you'll end up with this. Now once you have that line there, you can use the cutter and just keep trimming the gear slowly. Just keep slowly trimming away the gear until you've reduced it to look like this. So now once it's been reduced to something that has this diameter, you want to trim away the inside of the gear, and this is the area that supports that bearing. So you don't want to damage this area too much. You just want to trim the lip off of it. If you can see it there, basically there's a lip that holds the bearing. You just want to trim that lip off. Back to where I was saying that you can either have 2 methods, either have the bearing or the caliper. The other method is that you can set this to 5mm and basically just let it sit on the inside of the gear like this, and basically just scar the gear or scratch the gear, and basically what you would end up with if you continue doing it is that you would end up with this dark line that you see right here, and that would just give you a template as to make something circle. Basically the whole point of that is that you want to get rid of this material right here, because if you try to take the traxxas spur gear and touch it to that, you'll notice that it's too big. So you need to basically reduce this and make this area flat so that you can mount the traxxas gear onto it. So once you have trimmed away all this excess material and you have trimmed away this lip, you'll basically end up with something that looks like this, except without the holes. So now once you've ended up with something like this, this is kind of why you would need the file, is that once you've made the circle, you'd want to use the file and make this basically smooth and round as possible. You know, basically it doesn't have to be perfect, but just be close enough. The whole point is for you to have a a face plate so you can mount these, so you can drill these 3 holes to secure the traxxas spur gear onto it. So now once you've completed this piece, you'd want to move on to the traxxas gear. If you look at the traxxas gear, you'll notice that one side of it has all this excess material on it that makes it beefy on one side, and then it has these little knobs, and then it has all this writing on it that tells you the gear pitch and how many teeth are on it. And then basically these are here to secure, sort of prevent the screws from spinning back out. But that's really on the traxxas. You don't need that. That's as if it was mounted onto a traxxas vehicle. You don't need that for here. So what you'd want to do is take the cutter and basically just cut these knobs off. And then you basically end up with something that looks like this. So you'd see that it's all, the knobs have been trimmed off, but it's all rough. And you also have the writings here, and right around it's all rough. So you can either take the blade and slowly just nick away. That's why I took the blade and I bent it like this, so it gives me something to grip onto. And I slowly just trim away the materials. As you can see, it's like, it's basically just trimming away, and you just keep doing that. And you trim away all the writings and the dots, basically all the excess materials that's on the gear. And then you can also take the sandpaper and sand the gear to the point where it's flat like this. You can see it's not done perfectly because the writings of the gear is still there, but as long as the writing area or any of the imperfections you have does not come in contact with the face of the gear, you're fine. So once you've gotten the traxxas gear to this point, what you'd want to do is take the original bearing that came on the Arrma and put it back in there, which is the 6x11 bearing. You take the 6x11 bearing, put it back there, and you see that there's still a lip that holds it in place. And then you take the traxxas gear, you notice that both sides are flat, take the traxxas gear and it just fits right over the bearing. So now that's pretty much holding the gears aligned with each other because of that bearing. So now once you've got that there, you can put some pressure and hold the gear onto the Arrma spur gear piece. Take your pencil and you basically just want to mark one hole. You can take this thing back out and you're basically left with a pencil mark. Now you'd want to take the 1/16 drill bit and drill it precisely as you can in the middle of that hole. That's why I would use the hand chuck, so you can see what you're doing. If you're making a mistake by going on an angle, you can always correct yourself and basically do it there. Now let's say if you screw up on that one hole, you can just leave that there and just move to a different, put this gear back on there and just spin it, do the mark again, and just basically try again. So basically you'd want to get that right the first time though. And once you've drilled that one hole, you'll be left with that one hole there. So you'd want to start off with the 1/16 drill bit, drill that 1/16 hole, and then work your way up to 7/64. So if you look at the drill bit set that I have here, it has 1/16, 5/64, 3/32, and 7/64. I slowly worked my way up so that if I'm going off a little bit, I can correct myself with the next size up drill bit. And you'd want to stop at 7/64. Now once you've got a 7/64 hole drill into this gear, you'd want to take your M3 screw and basically thread it into the hole. Once you've done that, take your traxxas gear, put it back on there, take the screw, and basically thread it into place. You don't want to crank down on it too much because it's all plastic stuff. You just want it to be secure enough. And basically once you've got this one hole, you can take the pencil mark and mark out the hole for here, mark out the hole for here, and do the same thing. Take the drill bit, drill the hole. You can remove this gear back, take out back the screw, and basically you'll be left with 3 screw holes, which is basically right here. You'll be left with 3 pencil marks, and you basically just drill all 3 of them out. And bottom line is that you should end up with something that looks like this. Now once you've completed all of those steps and you end up with this, you basically just take your bearing, put it back on there with the gear, you line it up, and you should have something that's like this. Now the reason why I'm using these countersunk screws is because if you were to put a button head screw, it doesn't quite fit right, and I couldn't find a screw that's long enough or short enough that would basically go through the gear and sit flush on the other side. It's kind of hard to see, but basically see it's pretty flush. You don't want the screw poking out. So basically once you've done all of that, you'd want to mount the motor back onto here, and you'd want to mount the motor with a 20-tooth pinion gear. Sorry, this should have been one of the materials I mentioned earlier. So that you need a 20-tooth pinion with a 58-tooth spur. When you mount the motor back on, you'd want to follow the slots that's for a 25-tooth pinion gear. Basically, you'd mount the motor into these 2 holes, and you'd put the 22 pinion gear on there. And this is 32 pitch. Mount that on there, secure the motor in place, and then this piece just drops right in. And that's it. You're all done. I hope this video was helpful to those that were curious about it. If this is your first time seeing the video, I hope this helps you out. If you have any questions or comments, just leave it down below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.